everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Jane Rattenni with the Department of Community Services for Newcastle County, and I welcome you today to the dedication of the historic marker for Delcastle Prison Farm. The criteria for a historic marker in Delaware is that it must have historic significance based on influence, effect, or impact on the course of history or cultural development in Delaware. The historic marker we dedicate today designates the significance of the prison farm to our county and to our state. The prison farm operated from about 1915 until the 1960s and was recognized as being an innovative program serving as an agricultural and educational program for the rehabilitation of inmates. So with that being said, I'm happy now to introduce our first speaker, General Manager Sophia Hansen.
Thank you, Jane. And I'd also like to begin by thanking our community services staff, Susan Casey and Jane Rattenni, for pulling this together, as well as Jonathan Husband from Special Services. Can we give them a round of applause? I am a city planner by trade. That's my job. So preserving open space is probably 40% of what we do as planners. And I am honored to be here on such a beautiful and historically significant property today. And it just warms my heart because someone was just saying before we started, everyone knows what this would be without leadership from county government. And it would be probably homes, lots and lots of homes. So to have such beautiful open space that the public can enjoy, we're thankful for. And for the man who makes it possible, for the previous term you served, and the current 4 years you just had, and the 4 additional years you're about to have, we'd like to thank Tom Gordon and bring him to the microphone.
Thank you. I want to start off by thanking the Delaware Archives, Kevin, very much for participating in this, and for retired Captain George Williamson, who put time and effort in it to bring out this great history that I never knew. Now I know about the 1800s, and they did have dairy here, they had cattle and vegetables, but it may be the very first reentry program. That's what they're doing now. And it was diverse at the time. They're taking prisoners and teaching them a trade so they don't go back into the system. We have Frank Asphalt here, who actually worked here at the prison a long time ago, and some round of applause for Frank. And Jeff Seaman, thank you for coming today and providing some rich history also. And Mike Ramone, thank you for, this is your area, I know, but this is such a beautiful park. And it probably goes back to Levy Court, if it goes back to as far as it says, but they made a good decision. But they also made a good decision to get rid of the prisons. And we don't want them back. So this session, you got to reject that language. But I guess at the time, this was a cutting-edge program, if you think about it. 2 miles from the prison, they were bringing inmates over here and teaching them how to farm and agriculture so that they could move on and do good things. Back then, it was a lot of agriculture going on in Delaware. Not so much now. As we try to preserve it, you get beat up, but that's too political. Right now, I'd like to just, who else do we turn it over to? Let me see. I can do this. George. Welcome. I'm curious about the work you did on this. Your enthusiasm was really very good for everything that we accomplished, and we're going to unveil this beautiful plaque. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is George Williamson. I'm a retired Newcastle County police captain.
Put the mic up.
Oh, sorry. In 2012, I was doing research on the 100th anniversary of the police department, and I spoke with retired Lieutenant Rodney Reynolds. Rodney was one of the last police officers hired under the old levy court system of government. I asked him about Greenbank Prison, and he said, I don't remember Greenbank Prison, but I remember the prison farm. I says, what prison farm? He says, Delcastle Golf Course and Recreation Facility was a prison farm. I says, you kidding me? So I started doing some research, and I found out there was the prison farm for Greenbank Prison. The farm grew and raised all the food needed for the prison, and any food or dairy products left over was sold to the public. The farm had its own dairy operation, raised pigs and beef, and grew all its own vegetables. My curiosity, with the help of Delcastle Golf Management Company and Special Services, allowed me to go on the grounds, do some research, and also get into some of the documentation from the prison farm. Standing behind you is the original, which they just rehabbed, dairy processing building. Jeff Siemens will tell how his great-grandfather was hired to do the milk processing, which was given to the prisoners and sold to the public. In a 1919 article in a magazine called Delaware Magazine, they show that dairy building. And what's interesting, if you look at that, you'll see an opening going underground. What that opening was is the cold storage to store the milk so it wouldn't spoil before they got rid of it. The barn across the street is the original barn, except unfortunately there was a fire that destroyed a lot of it in, I believe, 1969. There were originally 2 silos, and now there's just the 1 silo. Go up the street, you can see, yeah, I found my notes here, the facility, which is still there. The golf course is using it for storage, but if you go in there, that was the processing building for the vegetables. When I got in there, the paint was peeling off the walls, and I can see the stenciling for when they stenciled the bags with the type of vegetables they are. And it's what the prisoners literally had some spare time, they just started stenciling the walls. The clubhouse, which is now the golf course's main building, was a dorm building built in the early 1930s. The basement was the kitchen and recreation area. The second floor was a dorm area, and the third floor was the prison offices. If you go into the Golf Pro Shop, you will see 2 of the original ice boxes, and I mean literally ice boxes. They're using them for storage, but they're the original ice boxes. If you walk outside through the kitchen, you will pass 2 underground storage facilities. They are underground. You walk in, temperature drops by about 15 to 20 degrees. This is where they stored the food, so it wouldn't go bad. Up the hill across from the pond is the original farmhouse from the 1700s. 2 additions have been added to the original building. To the left of the farmhouse are the remnants of the original barn and pig building. Still standing is 1 exterior wall. At the peak is a carved stone. The stone has the initials H and 1793. Underneath are the initials H and W. Research by the Mill Creek History Blog found that the farm owners in 1793 were Harrison and Hannah Wells, so we know where that came from. In front of that farmhouse is the original spring house. And it's amazing what kind of shape it's in today after almost 200 years. Personally, I'd like to thank Jeff Siemens and his cousin Sue Ellen Berkeley for their insistence in helping me do this research. They were able to give me a lot of research and numerous pictures to show the facility what it was like in the 30s and 40s. I also want to thank retired Lieutenant Frank Asphalt. He's the only person that I was able to talk to that worked here and remembered what it was like. And doing the research, trying to understand some of the buildings were here, he was able to describe them so I could understand what the buildings were on the property. He did a very good job. I'd also like to thank Wayne Merritt and Delcastle Golf Management Company for allowing me to walk these grounds and find everything I did. I really appreciate it. Lastly, I want to thank County Executive Tom Gordon and State Representative Mike Ramone. Representative Ramone got the funding to purchase the historical monument, and County Executive Gordon found the funding to rebuild the original dairy building. Lastly, in my opinion, it's amazing that was once a farm raising food and attempting to rehabilitate prisoners is now one of the most successful recreation facilities in Newcastle County. It's a job well done by our government. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Buddy. Next, our speaker will provide a brief personal overview of life here on the farm, as his great-grandfather was the farm superintendent, Mr. Jeff Siemens.
Thank you very much. I'm the son of Betty Berkey Siemens and John Siemens. I'm the grandson of Roy Berkey Sr. and Sarah Newhouser Berkey. My grandmother was from a Mennonite family from Bergenham, Pennsylvania. She was one of 8 children. There were 6 girls and 2 sons. She was the only one of the 8 to move down here. And she lived with her husband, Roy, and their 5 children, Homer, Don, Roy Jr., Olga, and my mother, Betty, on this farm from 1928 until 1943, when it was a prison farm. As I said, my mother is Betty. I have my sister is here, Beverly. First cousins Sue-Ellen and Lee. Their father was Roy Jr. and first cousin Phyllis Burton, and her mother was my mother's only sister, Olga Heinel. And so basically 3 out of the 5 families are represented here today. I want to thank County Executive Tom Gordon for inviting us to this ceremony, and we really appreciate this opportunity to share some of the history, and also Representative Ramon for supporting this project and finding the money to help with this marker. I think it's really a significant marker. I think a lot of people will probably pause and read it over the years, so thank you so much. Also, thanks to George Williamson, and Sue-Ellen and I, as you said, met with him several times on this project, and he put a lot of hard work into this. I just wanted to briefly say how my family got down here. As I said, my grandmother, Sarah, was from Bergenham, and somehow a lady who had some wealth and some land named Mrs. Boynton from the Falkland area somehow made it up to Gap, Pennsylvania, and found my grandfather, Roy Sr. I interviewed my Aunt Olga back in 1995, and I said, I guess the first question that I have is, what led to your mother and father moving down to Delaware? And she replied, she said, your mother was only about 6 months old when we moved down, and the reason we came, Mrs. Boynton owned a place in Falkland. And he came up to Gap, Pennsylvania, and she wanted to start growing tobacco. So my grandfather had some experience being from Lancaster County and growing tobacco. So she brought him down, and he brought the tobacco plants with him, and he was able to get the ground ready, and he started a tobacco farm not far from here, which was her enterprise. I'm not sure that went real well. Obviously, this part of Newcastle County is not known for its tobacco, but he ended up chauffeuring her. She also had a place down in Maryland, and he ended up chauffeuring her. Well, I'm not sure this set very well with my grandmother. So according to my aunt, he was chauffeuring her to Ocean City, Maryland, and after a while, my grandmother said to him, you came here to farm tobacco. If you continue being a chauffeur, I'm going to take the kids and go back home to Pennsylvania. So he decided not to be a chauffeur. And that's when he got the job here at the what was called the workhouse farm. That's how my family referred to it. And he started out in charge of the dairy operation that George mentioned, and he was later promoted to superintendent. So that's how we got here. The family lived in both houses on this farm from 1928 until 1943. My grandfather died unexpectedly in 1943 when my mother was 17. So I really never knew the place as my mother's home except for family stories. One of those stories, my cousin Sue-Ellen wanted me to relate, and she says that the 5 Berkey children lived at Delcastle. They always talked about how they loved having such a big yard where they could play, a couple or maybe 300 acres back then, 2 lakes to swim in, ice skating on the lakes, and all the rolling hills to sled on. And there were a few select prisoners that would come up to the house and help out with some chores like cleaning, washing, and ironing clothes. Our grandmother really liked a couple of these men, especially a man named George. Since she was the only one of 8 to move to Delaware, all the other siblings and relatives from Pennsylvania would come down on Sunday, show up unexpectedly, and expect dinner. So these family relatives would come down, they would visit, and Grandma would spend a couple of days baking pies and cakes. George and the others would get to have the pies and the cakes, or sample them, and when they were here helping out and getting the house ready. And I don't know whether this is true or not, but Grandma said that there was almost a riot when the other prisoners found out that they were getting samples of her pies and cakes. I know for a fact she made a great shoofly pie, so that was probably new to a lot of them. Also, the story circulated that when some of the prisoners, when their time was up, they would go out and do something else just to be able to come back. So I think the word is recidivism. So I think maybe my grandmother contributed to recidivism. Some of the prisoners liked working for her at the house and having her shoofly pie. I don't know if George or my grandmother ever kept in touch, but I do know that when he died, she told her children, who were still in Delaware, and there were 3 at the time, that she wanted them to go to George's funeral, and they did. So this was sort of a unique relationship that my family had with some of the prisoners that helped out. The other thing that I wanted to relate, I had done some research on my own and had thought of writing a book about Delcastle Farm, but I did not get very far with it. But I did learn that by 1920, the farming operation of Delcastle was well established. This was 8 years before my family moved here. And it received a glowing recommendation from an outstanding penologist named Hastings Hart. The Board of Trustees of the Newcastle County Workhouse invited Hastings H. Hart, who was director of the Russell Sage Foundation. I'm not sure whether that name rings a bell, but that is still a very viable foundation to this day. It was founded in 1907, and last year it had an endowment of $275 million. And it was started with an endowment of $10 million from a widow of a railroad magnate back in the early 1900s. So they invited Hastings Hart, who was director of the Russell Sage Foundation, to inspect the workhouse and to make recommendations for its improvement. In response to his invitation, Mr. Hart visited the workhouse in February of 1920, studied its administration, the plant, the industries, and the inmates, and this was what he said about it. With regard to the farming operation located within 2 miles of the main workhouse, the Delcastle Farm represents, to my mind, the ideal of prison organization. Your farm is taking the outcast members of society and is inspiring them with the ambition to do just as good a piece of farming as can be done anywhere in Delaware. So I really do think that this was a model place where non-violent prisoners were incarcerated, but I think that they really did a very good job here in helping to teach at that point agriculture, which was a very important business in Newcastle County and Delaware at the time. In summing up, as an earlier speaker said, I think we all know what this land would be if it had not been turned into a park by the county in 1968. And I'm sure that there would be hundreds of houses on both sides of Independence Church Road. These farm buildings anchor this park to the unique history of this land as a farm that housed prisoners and taught them how to farm. And on behalf of my entire family, I thank County Executive Tom Gordon and Representative Ramon and George Williamson for helping to preserve these historic farm buildings and for this marker. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Now I'd like to ask State Representative Mike Ramon to give a few comments.
Thank you. Good afternoon. As a state representative, we get the opportunity occasionally to participate in historical markers. But I will say this has probably been the most notable and the most informative I've ever been able to participate in. It has been a process, I guess about a year or so ago, George, more fondly known by me as Buddy, I've known Buddy for a very long time, asked me to come out here and look at, go over the grounds with him, and it was really, really exciting, fun, very informative. I mean, you're looking at a guy who was born in '61, so all this is history, and quite frankly, the only history I had at Delcastle when I was a young man, my brother, 5 years older, said, "Come on, I'm going to teach you how to golf," and we came out and golfed, and I golfed about a 90, and that was in the first 8 holes, and we didn't golf the next 16, so we just walked on. So, and honestly, I could say I've never golfed another day since. That's how bad I was. But at any rate, this is a very pleasant opportunity to really relish in the history that we have here. And George, Buddy, you are tenacious when you go to look at something. Buddy came up here and he saw something that was exciting to him, and he felt a need to bring that history out and to enable people to be able to share it. Your stories, your family's stories, have been very touching. Jeff, I wish we could have put more on the plaque so people could read more of it, because I really think it's very interesting, and I don't know, maybe the plaque starts you back on that excitement to write that book, because I think it would be something that would be really neat. And most important, you know, every county exec you have doesn't take the time and the pride that I think we get with County Executive Gordon. Tom has done a phenomenal job over at Carousel Park, which happens to be in my district, and Delcastle, which happens to be in my district. I'm a very lucky person because I get a lot of these big, beautiful county initiatives that we get to share with our community. So thank you from the 21st District and from, I'm sure Buddy and I both, for you taking it so seriously and really making something happen, because it could have been very easy for you just to, you got 6,000 other things going on, and it's difficult to prioritize something like this, but I think it was important, and I'm very grateful for that. So thank you. Thank you all for coming out.
Thank you so much. And we all know the very important work that Delaware Public Archives does for the entire state. So now I'd like to turn it over to Kevin Barney, who will talk about the marker process and a little bit about it.
Thank you all for coming today to celebrate another piece of Delaware history. For 85 years, the Historic Marker Program in Delaware has been tasked with identifying historic sites throughout the state. Many of these locations are part of Delaware's well-known history. However, what this program excels at is highlighting the lesser-known, though no less important, history. The beauty of the program is that it allows individuals an opportunity to engage each other in discussions of history and provides insight into the past that shaped the current landscape. As I stand here discussing the Historic Marker Program and engaging the public on the topic of history, I'm reminded of a quote from Dr. Walter Havinghurst. "The past is not the property of historians. It is a public possession. It belongs to anyone who's aware of it, and it grows by being shared. It sustains the whole society, which always needs the identity that only the past can give." As a native Delawarean, I'm always surprised at how rich and diverse our state history is. This, our newest marker, brings us one step closer to fully realizing the treasures our state contains and brings a historical site directly to the public. We strive to tell unique stories, and this site would be a very unique feather in our cap. The Delcastle Prison Farm provided an alternative style of incarceration within the state, as Delaware has historically had its share of gentlemen farmers and agricultural reformists. This site spans both worlds and provides an additional facet to the state's participation in both agricultural and reform movements. While this unfree labor may seem archaic, the bounty of the farm, which supplied dairy, produce, and pork, was used to feed the inmate population, and the surplus was sold for a profit. Today, a handful of buildings remain on the site, and the rolling hills, which were ideal for a golf course, are evocative of the site's past. Inside the packing house, a wall is covered in stamps, preserving a record of what was farmed here, as well as the markings of an inmate's time spent here. The ruins of bank barns and this now lovely restored dairy barn at Dairy House that I'm speaking in front of provide a tangible link to the past that we now commemorate today with this marker. On behalf of the Department of State, the Delaware Public Archives, and the State Archivist, I thank George Williamson for his dedication to the site and its history, and our legislative sponsors, Senator Blevins and Representative Ramon, who support sharing these stories in order to preserve Delaware's history. Thank you.
Great. And now for the formal unveiling of the marker, we'd ask our special guests to gather at the marker, and we will do the official unveiling and dedication.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.